Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I, Mikah Sargent, kick off the show by talking to Jay Peters of The Verge about a decentralized social media service called Bluesky. It is its own protocol, and we talk about whether it could be one of many decentralized social media networks that actually makes it somewhere in this race to replace Twitter. Then we talk to Mark Gurman of Bloomberg about Apple's plans for its AR/VR mixed reality headset. Apple has a lot in the works, including many of its own apps, and how this might be an iPad on your face. Our stories of the week are pretty nostalgic. We first talk about the end of computer magazines. Jason Howell and I take a trip down memory lane talking about our history with magazines and how it helped to shape who we are today. And I round things out with saying goodbye to Netflix DVD. I don't know, I guess it deserved an ode. So stay tuned for this episode of Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 282, recorded Thursday, April 20th, 2023.
Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club TWiT. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club TWiT Discord, a great clubhouse for TWiT listeners. And finally, the TWiT Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thanks for your support.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. My first interview has some breaking-ish news in it. I didn't realize that there was breaking news tied to this because I actually did the majority of the work last night. But apparently, we've got breaking news within the interview, and I love it when it works like that.
There's the breaking news sound.
There you go. Thank you. That's what I was waiting for. So decentralized social media, it's all the rage these days, that and AI. But usually when we hear about decentralized social media, Mastodon is somewhere nearby listening. And
There's a giant Mastodon in the room.
Right. That's me. You're talking about me, right? But what about Bluesky? This is Jack Dorsey's take on decentralized social. And I don't know. I'm curious about this. We'll get to the breaking news in a second, but joining us is Jay Peters from The Verge, who says it's his favorite Twitter clone yet. That's high praise, if I do say so myself. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to get you here. So have you, before we kind of get into Bluesky itself, I'm assuming you probably spent a good amount of time with some of the other options out there. Mastodon is, of course, just one, I suppose. But what other kind of alternative Twitter kind of experiences have you checked out?
I've looked at Mastodon, of course, and I've kind of been watching for things like Post.news.
Yeah.
There's one called T2, which I think is just supposed to be Twitter 2. There are so many of them out there, but where I've struggled is Mastodon, of course, has a really big community, which is great to be a part of. But these other new ones, it's very small communities or very early betas still. And I was intrigued when I checked out Bluesky.
Okay. And I guess the breaking news here is that the Android client was released late yesterday afternoon, which was the reason that I haven't checked it out for myself. Mikah actually hooked me up with an invite code, and I was like, okay, great, I'm going to do this. And then there was no Android client for me to throw it onto. So apparently you are on iOS, I'm assuming, and you've been checking it out for a while. What kind of stands out for you as far as the experience? Like, does it compare pretty closely with something like Mastodon, which I've certainly used a decent amount, or how is it different?
What I liked most about Bluesky is when you get your invite code and you make your account for the first time, it just recommended the primary Bluesky domain to be a part of. where I think people get tripped up with Mastodon is there's so many domains or places to make your account that you maybe don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And maybe with Bluesky, that's just because Bluesky is so early to begin that this is the only real place to hang out. But I thought that was really nice. And as soon as I jumped in, it felt like there was a really thriving community of people who had an idea of just the environment and the vibe they wanted to create. And it felt really fun to hang out in.
So when you joined on this kind of like early access, did you immediately get access to people you knew? Because I mean, you know, I guess in a situation like this, you're only going to be exposed to anyone else who happens to be on. And if it's early access, like, did that involve people that you already were following on the onboarding process? Or was it like a general feed that you were tapping into initially that you were like, oh, this is actually pretty positive?
It was just a general feed. They have a, I believe it's called a What's Hot tab, which just serves you things you think you might like. And that was kind of the first place where I started to just see what people are talking about, see who people are. As far as I know, I was one of the first like people in my tech journalist community to get access. That has already immediately started to change. And so instead of just following lots of people that I already knew, I got to see conversations from people that I didn't know, but who have been part of this community for a long time. And I thought that was a really fun way to learn about the environment in Bluesky. Just seeing it as a total newcomer without any preconceptions about what it might be.
I think what's appealing to me based on what you wrote about Bluesky is the levity of the platform. Because, you know, when did I start on Twitter? I think it was like 2008, like late 2007 or early 2008. So been with Twitter long enough to have seen the initial I'm eating a sandwich phase, and then turn it into everything that it turned into over the years. Things just got really heavy and not nearly as playful, especially in the last, I'd say, 5 years, which, I mean, I would say has kind of led to my kind of lagging interest in participating in some social media because, you know, why do I want to use something that's just going to bum me out on a regular basis? But it sounds like from what you're writing, at least early days with Bluesky, and maybe this is attributed to the fact that there just aren't an insane amount of people there. So it's a little bit controlled as far as that's concerned, but things seem a little bit light. That sounds kind of appealing to me. Yeah,
I found it's interesting in that it is very lighthearted and it feels like there's a lot of levity. I missed the first wave of what Twitter was. I started using it in college as like a journalism tool. They taught us to use it that way. I missed kind of the super fun phase. But I see lots of levity. But what I also see is an acknowledgement that we're all aware of, you know, sort of the weird or dark or how social media can be bad. And it seems like the people on Bluesky are like, we acknowledge that these are risks and, you know, maybe not fun things about being on social media, but we're going to try and create a positive place to hang out anyway. And I think that's just been a really interesting dichotomy to see. And I think that sort of ethos hopefully will inform how it grows and how people treat each other on the platform moving forward.
Yeah, indeed. Now, you write a little bit about the AT protocol. Talk a little bit about the protocol itself, because I mean, you know, we know kind of what's happening behind Mastodon. Like you said earlier, things can get a little confusing. Not as much so with Bluesky, but what makes the AT protocol, I guess, unique to what Bluesky is doing, and what does it have the potential to offer down the line?
Yeah, so my understanding is like Mastodon, which is built on top of the ActivityPub protocol. The AT protocol wants to be something that different applications you can use for types of decentralized social networking. But one thing they want to do a little bit differently is they're really key on finding ways to make custom algorithms that, in terms of what will serve you, you know, what you see in the feed all the time. And I think that's not present in the app now, but I think eventually the idea is if you want an algorithm that shows you primarily tech news or maybe primarily cats, right? Like then you can tailor that to what you want to see, as opposed to like what we've seen under Elon Musk's Twitter, where the algorithm, you can't really trust what it's going to show you, and what it shows you changes very regularly, often in response to what people are seeing on the platform and complaining about. So like, I think that could be a really fascinating way that changes our relationship with these platforms, assuming this protocol gets broader adoption and picked up and used in these ways.
Is there any possibility, do you think, of these protocols kind of becoming interoperable or being able to kind of cross, I don't want to say contaminate, but share information and communications between them? Because I mean, that sounds kind of appealing on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe it's best to keep things simple.
Well, that feels like the most decentralized thing that could happen is if these two protocols worked together in some way.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's a plan or down the line. And, if I had to pick, I think ActivityPub has the more momentum right now because it's already being used in places like Mastodon. And I think WordPress, they picked up like a ActivityPub extension or something. And so like, I think there's more activity in ActivityPub right now. AT protocol is still so early in its development, but maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the line, I think it could be really interesting to see adoption of both platforms and how they compare and how they might work together, or how you might have to pick a horse in what protocol you're on instead of what app you're on.
Right. Yeah. And then of course, moderation is a big consideration when we're talking about these social platforms. How has that been handled so far based on what you're seeing? I mean, you're talking about a very pleasant experience. I'm assuming, part of that is because it's a very controlled release. It's not open to everybody. So, there's kind of an invite system, and that helps keep things handled and maintained in a moderation sense, probably. But I mean, like, what is the plan? Do we have any insight into how the network keeps itself moderated going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a base level of moderation that's automatically built in the platform right now. And I think the folks who work directly on Bluesky, they are actively like dealing with moderation reports as they come in. I think like they're the front lines for that right now, the small team. Down the line, my understanding is they want to make something that the CEO called in a blog, composable moderation, where you would be able to pick certain filters or tags and apply those to what you see on Bluesky all the time. And you could maybe grab somebody else's filters or another company's filters or whatever to make the experience the way you want it to be. The idea here is so that Bluesky itself is not the one making every broad moderation decision for every person. They equated it to like a state government deciding different things. And the theory with Bluesky is if you don't like what that state government is doing, you can move to another state and be in their government, right? And so we'll have to see how that works in practice. But I think it's a really intriguing approach to moderation that I look forward to just seeing how it all works.
Yeah, indeed. I have seen some criticism out there online kind of being given to Bluesky in the sense that, okay, it's an open protocol, it's an open system. However, they're doing some things that are very centralized networky, like the invite system as one example. So it's kind of like a little of this, a little of that. If you're truly open, then everybody should get a piece or whatever. What's your take on that?
I think right now it makes sense for them to be an invite-only system. It seems like it's a pretty small team that's putting together Bluesky right now. And if it was just open to the masses already, I don't think they'd be able to field moderation. They would have maybe bug stuff they got to work out. Like, the Android app only just came out yesterday. Yeah. The iOS app was released, I think, at the end of February. And so they still have a lot of work ahead of them. And I think they're really aware of that. And they want to make sure they have the foundations of the platform in place before they really start to open it up to the masses. So I think it's an okay approach, though I can see the criticism of like, if it was truly, truly open, you just let it open right now. But yeah, I think they're taking the right approach with this one.
At the end of the day, we want a service that respects its users, that's safe to use, that isn't buckling under its own weight. So yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that as well. Jay Peters from The Verge, writing for The Verge. Everybody should check out Jay's article on why he loves Bluesky so much. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today, Jay. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Up next, it's time to take a look into the future at what Apple may or may not have plans for at its WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference, which Apple hosts every summer. We've heard that Apple may reveal a new product category, a headset. And joining us today to talk about what he knows is Bloomberg's own Mark Gurman. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Thank you for having me. How you doing?
Yeah, it's great to get you on the show. I am looking forward to this conversation because I think I was recording iOS Today on Tuesday morning, and then I saw this news piece hit, and I thought, oh boy, I got to read through this as quickly as I can and see what's going on. Can you start, before we get into the nitty gritty of what this report is about? Let's pretend this report doesn't exist yet. Tell us what the rumors have been up to this point about Apple creating a mixed reality headset. And maybe even for folks who might not know, what does mixed reality mean?
Yeah, just to take a step back, Apple sees mixed reality as its next major product category after the iPhone, after the iPad, after the Apple Watch. Mixed reality blends augmented reality and virtual reality. So virtual reality is sort of like an old school Quest or HTC Vive headset from Lenovo, and it's basically very much all-encompassing. All you see is the environment within your headset. Augmented reality is the opposite. It overlays digital information and graphics and such over the real world. So essentially like what Google Glass did 10 years ago. Mixed reality does both. And in the case of the Apple headset, you'll be able to twist a dial similar to the digital crown on the Apple Watch or on the AirPods headphones to go in and out of AR mode and VR mode, right? And so my story this week is detailing basically the core of the functionality of this device. It's going to be like an iPad or a Mac for your face, the future of the computer, as some people call it. And you'll be able to do your entire workflow, right, supposedly on this device. You'll have all the core iPad apps. You'll have all the App Store apps. You'll have virtual workouts like Fitness Plus. You'll have gaming. You'll have a new sports viewing portal, right? So watching sports in VR like you're courtside. So it's going to have a pretty impressive array, a feature list that's a mile long. And I'm curious which features themselves will mostly resonate with consumers. One of the core features that they'll be pushing is virtual reality FaceTime. So the device has advanced cameras in and out of the headset to sense what you look like and build a realistic recreation of who you are in virtual reality. And that becomes your avatar in the device. So I'm looking forward to, seeing my avatar at least.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of this new reporting now, we have seen at least virtual reality headsets from several companies and some augmented reality tries in the past. But what is new here is with a mixed reality headset having the ability to kind of switch between AR and VR. And I'm kind of curious, just in general, there's been all of this hesitation, sort of some companies have stepped away from VR, AR in big ways where they kind of had an early investment in it. What is it that Apple is doing differently, if they are, that is going to possibly make this a more popular product?
It's hopefully launching from day one, and I say hopefully for them, with a very strong ecosystem of apps. There'll be a run-up between the announcement of the product and the release of the product, and their hope is that the App Store will be filled with optimized apps for this XROS, as they're going to call it. The ability to run iPad apps in the device from the get-go. Obviously, their privacy standpoint has been key to this. It's a big differentiator from Meta. They claim to be obviously more private, more encrypted. they're not pushing this idea of living in the device, right? Like some sort of metaverse. It's going to be very tailored to those use cases. So you'll use FaceTime, right? But you're not living in it, just like you'll use FaceTime on your phone or on your iPad or Mac, what have you. And I think that the AR mode is going to be a really key component of the device as well. Likewise, the external display on the outside, where you'll be able to show your eyes and your full face even when wearing the headset. So I think, a combination of those things they think are going to make this a real seller. On the other hand, it's going to be extraordinarily overpriced. $3,000 at least, or around in that range. $2,000 to $3,500 will fall in there. I don't think this is going to do well initially. I think that before smartphones, before iPods, or before the iPhone, before the iPod, before the iPad, before the Apple Watch, there weren't people saying that we don't need these products, right? I think there was plenty of demand and interest in MP3 players and phones and tablets and watches and such. Nobody's asking for a mixed reality headset. Nobody wants this thing. This is really going to be, there was always a classic Steve Jobs line where we want to invent products that the world doesn't know that it needs yet, right? And okay, fine, he said that. Was that really true though? That the world didn't know it needed an iPhone or an iPad or an iPod, right? These were all devices that fit in to what people were clamoring for. Everyone wanted a computer in your pocket. Everyone wanted an Apple Watch, right? This is really the first time where Apple's going to be bringing something to market that nobody wants, right? And tell people on why they should pay big bucks for something that's going to take them out of the real world. And so we'll see how it goes. My personal bet is that it'll probably do well in the future, but it's going to be pretty slow and dramatic at the get-go.
So let's go to that price. You said, anywhere between 2,500, 3,000, maybe even more potentially. Is the price so there are different goals kind of whenever you are setting a price. Obviously, you want to make your money back and then some, but it can also be a way to sort of box out a certain category. Is this such a high price because Apple is using it as a means to make sure it only ends up in the hands of developers who want to make stuff for the platform? Is it so that it only goes to those early adopters who are super tech enthusiasts? Or is this just the cost of doing business when it comes to this sort of new kind of technology? I know a lot of the technology itself isn't new, but whenever it's all brought together in this one package, that sort of packaging of the technology makes it new. What do we think about the price here?
Mikah, that's a terrific question. And the God honest truth, from my understanding, is that this is going to sound new and surprising, right? They're not pricing it at $3,000 in order to lock people out of the market.
Okay.
They're not pricing it at $3,000 to enjoy their typical 35% to 60% margins, which that would be, at least for them, a good reason to do that. I don't agree personally as a consumer, but it's actually because that's what it costs to make. I don't expect them to profit $1, maybe $1, but I don't expect them to profit anything significantly on this headset from a hardware perspective in the early innings of this device.
Whoa.
Right? For the most part, they'll be selling these at cost. It's a combination of the very pricey technology, external OLED display, 2 4K micro LED VR panels inside, upwards of 14 cameras on the outside, iris and retina scanners on the inside, battery, M2 chip, a very pricey aluminum frame, the cushions, right? It's going to be expensive. So I definitely think that it's a combination of that, plus the low units, right? Price comes down with economies of scale. I don't think that this is going to be scaling at such large quantity where they're able to get the price down to where they want it at this point. A lot of the tech is very nascent. They're having to not profit on the individual components as well that go into this thing. So I definitely think that it's going to be a few years before they're really going to profit on it. They're working on 2 follow-ups already. One is a more powerful version of this initial headset, and one is a cheaper version of the headset. I would say this first version of the headset, sort of that pro tier, is using Mac grade components, right? If you want to compare a Mac to an iPhone, whereas the cheaper version would be using sort of iPhone caliber components. So if you want to delineate between an A series chip and an M series chip, for example.
I'm super interested in seeing how this plays out, and I totally understand what you're saying as far as the initial launch is going to be dramatic and kind of quiet as far as reaction, I'd say, from people who are really behind this, and that it's really all about the long tail. The comparison to make is that Facebook did its thing where it changed its company name to Meta. Mark Zuckerberg went all in on this idea of like metaverse everything. It's the future. It's our 10-year plan. And what are we 2 years in? Or I don't even know if we're 2 years into that at this point. But, there's an article that someone that Scooter X put in the chat room. Meta reportedly stopped pitching advertisers on the metaverse. And it's almost like Meta. I can feel the regret. Yeah. I can feel the regret of the fact that things have shifted, and this like forward-thinking, futuristic, like, no, I don't care if it doesn't make sense now. It does then. Like, I kind of feel them, starting to change their mind a little bit. Do you think Apple, has the potential to suffer from the same kind of impact? I mean, Apple's a different kind of company, and often they can make things really successful that were just kind of floating on the top, by anyone else that was trying. What is your thought there? Do you think Apple's capable of that long term?
I think Meta was too aspirational. I mean, they changed the name of the company to focus around this metaverse approach.
Yeah.
They sold a false promise of these capabilities that don't necessarily exist yet. I've been watching the NBA playoffs, as you can imagine, and they have two commercials running. They have a doctor diagnosing a patient's knee cartilage, and she's wearing these AR glasses, and it's basically doing a live x-ray and analysis of this guy's knee. And then you have the other ad where you have a bunch of firefighters wearing AR goggles running into a burning house or a burning building, and the glasses are sort of showing them where everyone is located, right? This is how Meta is advertising AR, VR, mixed reality. That doesn't exist.
No.
Right?
It's
Those things don't exist. And it's fantasy, exactly. It may never exist. If it does, it'll be 20 years. Right. And so they're pitching a false promise. People are realizing that it's BS, and they've completely soiled the market, not only for themselves, but for everyone else. It was going to be difficult enough for Apple to sell people on something that Apple knows that people don't need or want. Right. And now on top of it, not only Apple, but everyone getting into this space has to get over the hump that Meta has created to really soil the market. Right.
Yeah.
They took something that people already didn't believe in and made it even less believable. So
that's a challenge for Apple, absolutely.
But Meta is still going full throttle on this. They're working on 5 or 6 next generation headsets already. I think that this can play out similarly to Android and iPhone, whereas the iPhone will be on the high end and Meta will be on the low end. That's if Meta gets its act together. I think Apple will be quite successful at the high end. They have put it this way. Google is churning out new Pixel phones twice a year already since 2016, and they are not making an impact on the market. And that's Google.
Yeah.
Apple has 3 times as much cash as Google. And so if they can sustain having a hardware division that's really doing nothing for the company, I think Apple could sustain churning out these headsets until something works. They'll eventually get it right. It took a few years on the Apple Watch, but they got it right eventually. Remember the iPhone 3G price cut with the iPhone 15 years ago? That helped tremendously. The other thing I will say is that Meta went 100% into the metaverse. I would say Apple's probably going 5% into mixed reality, right? And I don't think that push negates anything else that they're doing, whereas Meta negated all the good they were doing. I'm not going to sit here and say they were doing a ton of good, but what I'm trying to say is they went full throttle into something when they probably should have made it a core part of their business, but not the business.
Yeah.
One more thing here. I want to follow up back on what you were talking about with the pricing. Has Apple, in modern Apple times, since they've had a lot of extra money and have been good to go, not in the times where it was like, oh, what's the future of Apple look like? Has there been a product that they were, as you kind of think, just cutting very close to even and not making a bunch of extra profit on it? Is this an unprecedented thing for them, or have we seen this before and maybe it just wasn't as clear as it is with this product?
So it's twofold. It's unprecedented at the price, right? $1,000 and over, they're making a ton of profit, whether that's the iPhone, whether it's the higher end Macs. 3 products that I will tell you that cut close here. But it's not an apples to apples comparison. The lower end Apple Watches that they're selling at $200, probably getting close. The Apple TVs for sure, right? For sure. If you remember the $99 Apple TV pucks in 2010, for sure. But like these Apple TVs today, they cut the prices. They're getting fairly close. And then the HomePod Mini, they're probably getting pretty close too. Their corporate average for margins, I believe, is about 37.5%. And I would guarantee that those 3 products fall below the average. And the Apple TV closer to 0, and the HomePod Mini probably closer to 10%, right? But in terms of a $3,000 caliber device, yeah. Now, there's a totally different direction Apple could choose to take this, right? There's a scenario, which I think is unlikely, that this device costs $3,000 to make, and they price it at $2,000 and take it as a money loser to try to get the category going.
Wow. I
don't foresee that happening. It's also possible that they have been able to get the price down now that they're mass producing it significantly, right? It's possible they've maybe gotten it down to $24.99, right? That seems likely to me too. So we shall see, right? I would be surprised if they announced a price at WWDC. I think maybe they don't announce it until it's a little bit clearer toward end of year when they're actually shipping it, how things shake out once they're getting these things produced.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. I said that was the last question, but I do have one final question, and then we'll let you go. And it's about, in your piece, you kind of talk about how Apple is almost taking a 2-pronged approach here. You've got this sort of productivity mindset where they really are trying to make sure that Pages, Numbers, Keynote, all of that is available. And then the gaming activity area where you can play games on it, but you can also do workouts and meditation. And you talk about a dial of switching back between AR and VR. Do you think that Apple sort of from the get-go had this mindset in play, or is this a way for Apple to sort of spread out the risk and make it so that, you know, if somebody wants to use it for productivity, it's there for them. If somebody wants to use it for this, it's there for them. I guess what I'm saying is, think about the Apple Watch when it first launched, the most personal device you'll ever own. And it was about the heartbeat on your wrist and all this other goofy stuff. And then it just became almost exclusively, it's an activity tracker. It's a health device. And they didn't necessarily have that as the main scope. Here, you see them looking at 2 main scopes from the get-go. Is that a lesson learned, or is it just, you know, they want it to be both productivity and play?
How about this? I have a story actually coming this weekend on Sunday, exactly on this topic. If you'd like, we can have me back next week and I'll go through it once the story is out. We can talk all about that if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to have you back on then. And after you've got, you know, sort of your analysis figured out. Mark Gurman, thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to hearing more about this. Of course, folks can head to Bloomberg to check out your work, but let us know where they should go to keep up with what you're up to.
Yeah, Twitter's great. Twitter.com/@MarkGurman or Bloomberg.com/PowerOn to subscribe to my weekly column. It was awesome being on here. Can't wait to come on again soon. It's always a pleasure. Always love to come on. So
thank you so much.
Thanks to you and your audience.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty, let us move right along to Jason Howell's story of the week.
All right, at this point, so I hosted TWiT this last Sunday, and then I hosted This Week in Google yesterday in Leo's absence. And so I was kind of like, do I do this story again? Because it was on both of those shows, but it's really close to my heart. I realized like that it actually means something to me. So I thought I'd kind of expand on it a little bit. Harry McCracken wrote a fantastic article for Fast Company. This is on his Technologizer blog about the demise of the computer magazine. And he wrote it specifically because there are two magazines that are delivering their last print issues. There's Maximum PC and MacLife. This current issue is their last issue, delivered in print. You can still get it going forward, but it'll be digital going forward. Harry says that this signals the end of the computer magazine in America. So there might be computer magazines outside of the country, but he says, as far as computer magazines made in the USA, this would be it. So like, as we've talked about this on TWiT and Twig, I've been trying to think about like, why does this story mean so much to me? I never read Maximum PC or MacLife, but for whatever reason, this seems like a big deal to me. And I don't know if it actually is, but we're talking like 50 years of computer magazines.
Yeah.
And to see them go away, I mean, it makes sense. Magazines just as a whole are a lot less relevant nowadays than they were definitely 50 years ago, 40 years ago. The internet has made that so. But I thought, I'm curious to know what your background is with any sort of computer magazines. And I thought I'd kind of, reminisce a little bit on my own history, because I definitely have a few that I was like really into back in the day. So when I was when I was a kid, this is back in the 80s, the Commodore 64 was a huge device for me. Like that was the technology piece of my childhood that defined my childhood when I look back on it. And there was a magazine called Compute Gazette. That was it was an offshoot of a magazine called Compute. It was a Commodore-only magazine that did things like gave you glimpses at new games that were coming out. It had this section that was devoted to basic programming. It was called Basic Corner or something like that. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Compute's Gazette. And so as a kid, I could get this magazine, and there would be like code that I could enter in. There was like machine language code. They had certain sections of it dedicated to machine language, literally like pages of nothing but numbers. And I specifically remember sitting down with my Commodore 64, entering in these things because, on the other side of that rainbow is a game that you would get to play. And usually they'd have that game like featured on the cover. It was like some sort of like artistic rendition of what that game was. Meanwhile, it's like 5 pixels, moving around.
Imagination.
And I would spend all that time entering it in, and then I hit go or run or whatever, and it wouldn't work. Oh. And I'd have to go then through through every single number and troubleshoot. And as painful as that sounds, and as painful as it was, in retrospect, like it's also a very fond, like exciting thing, because it was like, wait a minute, I'm going to enter these numbers into this thing, and that's going to turn into a game that I didn't have before. And then I have that game, it was just really cool. There was another magazine called Loadstar, which was a Commodore magazine. They had actually floppy disks, 5 1/4-inch floppy disks that would ship with the magazine.
Yeah.
And so you get the magazine, be in cellophane, and you open it up, and inside there was a floppy disk that you could just throw right into your drive and get
Viruses
some games immediately.
No,
yeah, right. Before those were ever, at least in my purview, they were not as much of a threat then. But that was like magic. It was like, wait a minute, I can buy that magazine. I'm going to have to pay a little bit more for that magazine, but I get a disc that has games on it. It was all about games for me back then. Late 80s, early 90s, I moved from the Commodore 64 to an IBM PS2. And then shortly after that, I got a Macintosh SE30. And at that time, I was reading Compute. So Compute had Gazette, which was Commodore related. And then they had just like Compute magazine, which was kind of more broad, the PC market in general. And so that was really cool. My taste was maturing. I was I was graduating from the Commodore 64 to an IBM and to a Macintosh. And so that magazine helped. Same with Byte. I don't know. Byte's like the one that so many people know, because I think probably.
I don't remember, and we'll get to mine in a moment, but yeah, I'm sure that Byte was one that I did check out, but it was lost in all of the different magazines.
Oh, I mean, at that point, yes, totally. There were so many, but Byte, I think, my understanding is that Byte was one of the, if not the first of these like computer magazines, and definitely one of the longest standing ones around. So that was cool. And then the only other one that I wouldn't say like I had a God, did I get this delivered or did I just get it at the store every once in a while? Was Computer Shopper, which I don't know if you remember Computer Shopper.
I don't.
You'd remember it because it was probably that thick.
Holy moly.
And
all the trees.
An issue. Oh yeah. It was like the size of a Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
And
what's in it?
It's ads. It's like,
because it's a computer shopper. So
yes.
You just could look through and buy parts for computers.
Right. Well, and understand that a lot of this stuff, at least when I was into this stuff, it was pre-internet. So Computer Shopper for me was like an aspirational magazine.
Right.
It was like all these things that I couldn't afford, but I wanted because they were better than the things that I had.
Yeah.
And also understanding like what is a megahertz? What is an Intel processor? Kind of getting exposed to these things. I mean, it's just tons and tons of ads from all these different storefronts all across the world.
Wow,
basically.
crucial.
And
wait, was that CDW? CDW,
yeah.
Is it possible?
Computing solutions from CDW. February 2002 is that issue. But anyways, I'm not kidding. It was that thick. I mean, these things, yeah, pretty crazy. So, and that's not even factoring in video game magazines because that's not really what this is, I think, about. I think video game magazines are still going strong.
Have a little bit more life left.
Yeah. But anyways, it got me thinking about that stuff. I'm curious to know, like, do you have any history with any of these like computer magazines or anything like that?
Yeah, I thought so. Going to the sort of thought about it, yes, nostalgia, and I think that it also ends up being wrapped up in all of this. Ends up being a reminder of our mortality.
Just like the trees that are dead to create the magazines themselves.
It's just,
we too shall die someday.
Yeah, I mean, when you see these things leave, then you are reminded that there's an ebb and flow of everything. To everything. But so I can't remember titles. There were several PC magazines that I had as part of sort of a larger subscription or, regular, I guess, yeah, it was a subscription. What I remember more would be a bunch of graphic design magazines, but it has the same, because I originally went to school for graphic design. That's what I was going to go into the ad business. And I found journalism while I was studying for graphic design and advertising. Mm-hmm. And just the nostalgia you were talking about with popping in the floppy disk. I remember collecting CD after CD after CD and getting a bunch of, patterns for Photoshop, images, and all of that kind of stuff.
Expanding your toolkit.
Yes.
Like, I can use this now.
And then having all of these magazines that I could pull and get inspiration out of. Yeah. And I think the same thing did apply when it came to, learning, because way back in middle school, I had a little web design business that I was doing. And I had the magazines that were teaching me how to add JavaScript, how to, at the time, use Flash. So I had like Flash coding. I can't remember what Flash's sort of coding language was, but learning about that and using that and creating. And so every, month when I would get a new one, I'd pop it in, get the project for it, and get to learn a little bit more about how that worked. So yeah, I mean, a lot of my interest and enthusiasm for technology was born of magazines.
Yeah, right.
Because it was aspirational, like you're talking about, and inspirational. Mm. And so, yeah, it does make you sad. I think nowadays, folks can get a similar experience, but there is something visceral and enjoyable about having this sort of totem, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
That makes it all like a wholly different experience. And that, I think, is what makes magazines so cool. Even I can, in my head right now, I'm smelling a magazine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yes. That smell of ink and paper. And even completely unrelated to computing, like I was a GQ subscriber for so long, and reading the different articles in there, but also like the scent that I still wear to this day. I remember I was in college and, flipping the page, and then you have the page that's sort of like got the glued flap on it.
Yeah.
You pull it back, you scratch it. And I remember smelling the Victor and Rolf Spice Bomb and going, oh my God, I have to have this scent. And I had to save up money to be able to buy like my first bottle of it. But I did it, and like to this day, it's a scent I've worn for years because, and it all came from like a magazine that I, happened to. And at that time, like it was a proud moment for me because I grew up pretty poor. And so to have this sort of like fancy thing that I strove for while I was, working and going to school and everything. So yeah, there's so much feeling tied up in magazines. So I completely understand that nostalgia that exists there. And there's something incredibly powerful, even if you are just replicating what's in there and typing it in, to take the time and the drive to get that done. And then when it doesn't work, you didn't give up. You went back and you fixed it. And then you get this progress. There's just something so cool about that.
Yeah, it was very cool. And it wasn't me entering code because I want to learn how to code. It was me entering code because, you're telling me if I put those numbers in there, I get a game?
It's like, what?
Okay, I'm going to put those numbers in there and get a game.
It's like a cheat code for life.
Totally. Totally. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So now this is my third show talking about this article. I can let it be. I can just be with my own memories of my childhood computer magazine experience. So there we go. But talking about nostalgia, your story of the week kind of has some nostalgia for me as well.
Yeah. If you ever got one of these in the mail, for the listeners, I'm holding up a red envelope with the Netflix logo on the front of it. You may have been a subscriber to Netflix DVD. You may remember that that's how Netflix kind of got its start. Think of sort of the red box rental, all of these different, going to Blockbuster. Netflix did that, but online. So you would go online, you'd find a title that you were looking for and essentially rent it and get to watch the film, and then you would send back the DVD in the mail, and then they would send you the next one in your list. And so you would build out a queue and be able to have your Netflix titles, or rather just DVDs coming through. And it's funny because this service has been around for a long time. The first DVD they ever sent out was way back, and I thought this was wild to hear this year, 1998. Excuse me?
Yeah.
1998, March 1998, the first DVD shipped was Beetlejuice.
Oh, no kidding.
And I will refrain from saying that two more times.
Yeah, don't. We don't need him coming in here and ruining the show.
So that title was sent out way back in March 1998. And then kind of interesting too, from this email, and we're getting to the punchline, I guess, in a moment of what's going on here. But the most frequently requested title, according to the letter that they sent out, was The Blind Side, the film with Sandra Bullock, about the football player that the woman sort of brought in and took care of. And they've sent out more than 5.2 billion DVDs over the years. If you are a Netflix DVD subscriber, you should know, because you would have gotten an email, that the company is getting rid of this service on September 29th of this year. So Netflix's DVD service is coming to a close after 25 years of service. We were talking about it before the show started. I actually recently became a subscriber to Netflix's DVD service because there was a title that my partner really wanted to watch, and I could not find it for purchase anywhere. I could not find it on any streaming service, and Netflix's DVD service happened to have the film there. So I signed up, and it was just as simple as I remember. I added the title to my queue, and then a couple of days later, I went to my mailbox and I had the envelope in my mailbox, and it comes in a little sort of thin. I was kind of surprised at how thin it was, a thin envelope, and you take out the DVD and it's in a little sleeve watch it, and then whenever you're ready, you slip it back into the envelope, and it has sort of a secondary seal. You seal it back, and you can pop it into any mailbox. You don't have to put postage on it or anything like that, and then it goes back.
It was super easy.
Super. I mean, they made it so easy, and they were also incredibly forgiving, which I can remember growing up. We were, my mom especially was incredibly vigilant about when we would go to Blockbuster and get something. She knew where that disc or that VHS was at all times. And, we had very strict rules if it needs to stay here. Because if you racked up those fees of not getting it back in time, if you weren't kind and didn't rewind, if you lost it, you would end up spending a lot of money just to continue to be able to rent. Netflix's DVD service, I may have lost a DVD. They have a great thing where you can just go online and say, sorry, I lost it. And then they will forgive you. You didn't have to pay anything extra, and send you the next one in your queue. And I imagine that if you do that too regularly,
don't do that all the time.
Then it was going to change. But for just that one, it was great. So that was an awesome sort of, I wasn't expecting that. I thought that it was going to be a little bit more strict than that. So being incredibly forgiving was great. I think, though, what's interesting or most interesting to me about this story, and actually The Verge covered this quite well. So this is a piece from David Pierce, who is an incredible writer now at The Verge. And essentially what he was talking about is by shuttering its DVD service, it kind of proved that Netflix wins. So it closing its own doors is proof that the Netflix model is the one that works. Netflix DVD is absolutely secondary to Netflix's larger streaming business, and Netflix kind of ate its own lunch, I guess is the term or the terminology, in creating that streaming version of the service. And so the fact that now it doesn't really need to ship out DVDs, that folks can just go online and stream it, is proof that streaming is the way. I mean, we've seen, as time has gone on, there's less of a focus on physical media. There's still, the holdouts, and there will always be people who like DVDs, and Blu-rays, of course, are the modern technology. But a lot of people, they buy their TV. At least where I'm from, you get your tax return and then you upgrade your TV. And your TV has an internet connection, and you watch Netflix and Hulu and all the apps that are there. Some people go a step further and they get a set-top box, and then they do it all from there. Some people use their cable service that has sort of smart TV features as well. So I would argue that the average person is most likely using streaming built into something that they have. Maybe you buy the Xbox or the PlayStation.
I would imagine so.
And they use the apps there. So I'm not surprised to see this closing. But again, it was a bit of a kick in the nostalgia.
Yeah. I mean, 25 years. I was just looking up because I remember I have this faint memory of back in the day being when Netflix shipped more of its movies than it did, streamed online, and how Netflix shipments occupied this insane percentage of total U.S. Postal Service activity. I was trying to find what are the numbers. I couldn't find it, but I did find an article from 2010 that noted that the previous year, the bright red envelopes made their way into the homes of 12.3 million subscribers nationwide. So you can imagine the amount of those things flying around.
Wow.
And I remember when my wife and I had Netflix in the kind of the golden years of the mailing, envelopes thing. And, I think we were on the 3 plan. So at any given time, we had, the ability to have up to 3 red envelopes. And, you mentioned managing the queue. And I so remember going in there being like, what is the next one we want to see? And it's so different from now, because now it's like, what do I feel like right now? Then it was planning your watching. Like, what am I going to want to watch in 2 days or tomorrow? It's going to be this one. So put it up at the top of the queue. Hopefully we get it in time so that can be the movie that we watch, then on Thursday or whatever the case may be. I had to be a lot more intentional about it. And also I recall Netflix being, very kind of, I don't know the word, poo-pooed because they were trying to make this streaming thing a legitimate thing, a thing that people wanted to use. And I remember in the early days of Netflix streaming, I mean, the library was horrible. It was like, no one wants to watch any of the movies that are actually on Netflix. It was never top tier movies. It was always kind of like the stuff that you'd see at the bin in like Walmart, the 3 DVDs for $5. Mm-hmm. It was always those, It was like, okay, I guess it's better than nothing.
Right.
There's probably some good stuff in there, but that's really changed over the years. And now this is just how, how we get our streaming media.
Yeah. And all of the, major licenses exist there.
Yeah.
I was checking to see what it costs. So it looks like it's $7.99 plus tax for the DVD service. And if you want Blu-rays, then it's $9.99 plus tax for the Blu-rays. And so that's per month to have the DVD service. And I need to find the DVD that's at home right now so I can send that in and get what's next in the queue. I guess at some point I added some films to the queue, but I'm going to try to run this out. I might as well go ahead and check out what is available.
Yeah.
And be able to watch those films before they close down in September. So,
I mean, and it used to be that it made sense to still do the mailing if you had a really nice home theater, and you had like a Blu-ray player and full surround sound system. But there's been so many advances in streaming codecs and streaming audio, compression, all that stuff that now it's a lot less necessary. Although I'm sure purists would probably say
there will always be,
heck no, I will only ever watch, a Blu-ray. I will never watch streaming. Why would I taint my eyes with that poison?
I don't scratch my corneas with those pixels. Yes. Scott Wilkinson was just on Ask the Tech Guys last Sunday, this past Sunday, and I had talked to him, about his own thoughts on a streaming media versus physical library and what he saw as the benefits to the physical library. And he was saying, yes, you're going to get a much in theory, and in many cases, I guess, you will get the better quality because of the less compression that's there. And also you're not dealing with buffering and all these other possibilities for how sort of over time as you're watching something, it might vary in the quality. So you get a consistent quality overall. And then he said that, of course, the other benefit is if you own, so that it doesn't quite apply to in this case, but if you own the physical media, someone's not going to come to your house and take it away because a licensing
There's always that, yes.
Versus streaming where sometimes stuff is available and sometimes stuff is not available because they've taken it away. So, I know that folks have also used Netflix's DVD service as a way to build their own personal library of content. There are means and methods for that we'll talk about on the show. But
for sure,
the New York Times, in kind of talking about this, has said that it could be this could be a way for Netflix to save a little bit of money in the long term, since it did miss its revenue guidance, because then it's cutting back on fees for shipping and everything else. So as the company many a tech company seems to be looking for cost-cutting measures.
For sure.
Honestly, I'm a little surprised that they haven't gotten rid of it sooner. You know what I mean? Because if you have the choice of letting people go and cutting back on spending on media, all of the different methods, it's like this one does seem to be let me turn that around so you don't think that it's fake like it is. Then you see the glaring issue that is the costs of just running this business, of sending out discs to people. So September, we will see the end of Netflix DVD. And thanks in the meantime, Netflix DVD, for at least giving me access to some films I couldn't find in other places.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of its strengths. Even today with its streaming catalog, which is not perfect, none of them are, but their mail-in library is very substantial, like very complete. And you can find a lot of stuff there you can't find anywhere else. I'm curious to know if we'll ever be clued into like a liquidation. How do they liquidate all that stuff?
Yeah, are these just going to go into a landfill? Are they going to be melted down and turned into a giant statue of a Netflix DVD envelope?
Sell them for $1 a piece on eBay or something, or I don't know.
Yeah, something.
They certainly have extra life to them. I really hope they don't just melt them down and put them into a landfill. But yeah. All right. Well, the last half of today's episode was like nostalgia, heartstrings.
Yeah. If we could just do some subtle, why did I say piano as I played the violin? That was odd. Piano.
It's okay. I hear it with my ears. I can hear it even though
real quick, Mikah. What was the first movie again?
Scoob.
No.
That was
the
yours.
First movie. Yeah. Oh, I'm not telling you.
Really?
Yeah, because if I say it 2 more times, he's gonna come.
Oh, I see what you were doing. You're smart. He's in cahoots with Beetlejuice.
That's the second time.
Dang it! I shouldn't have done that. Sorry.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to see Beetlejuice.
All right. Well, before he comes in here and makes life really difficult for us all, let's end the show. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. You will not find Beetlejuice on the page. I'm distracted by Beetlejuice. If you would like to get all of our shows ad-free, please check out Club Twit. Starting at $7 a month or $84 a year, you can join the club at twit.tv/Beetlejuice. I mean, twit.tv/Club Twit. When you head there, you can become a member, and you get a lot of great stuff by becoming a member. You get every single Twit show with no ads. It's just the content because you, in effect, are sponsoring these shows. You are the support, so you get to have that content pure and clean. You also get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else. Behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, and special Twit events that aren't published elsewhere. It's a great opportunity, and there's a lot of content in that library that, joining now, you'll get to have access to. Plus, you get access to the Club Twit Discord server. It's a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and those of us here at Twit. Super easy to use, too. You just download the Discord app on your phone or on your computer. Whenever you sign up, you'll have it's just a button you can press to sort of log into Discord. You'll create your Discord account. And then from there on, you've got a place to chat. And we've got lots of obviously Club Twit members who are there in the Discord, but also many a Twit host and producer or a panelist or a contributor, all there in the Discord regularly chatting away. So please consider joining the club, twit.tv/Club Twit. When you do, you're also going to gain access to some great shows that are exclusive to Club Twit. There's the Untitled Linux Show, which is a fantastic show all about Linux. So for all of you Linux fans out there, consider joining so you can get that. You can also watch Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows program, which is a show full of tips and tricks that are a way for you to make the most of your Windows PC. And there's also Hands on Mac, which is a fun program. Well, I'll let you be the judge because I am the host of it. But it's a great way to stay up to date with Apple features, including the Mac, the iPhone, the iPad, your Apple Watch, all of Apple's various devices, and the newly relaunched Home Theater Geeks featuring Scott Wilkinson. It is a great program, I can say that, for learning about the home theater, for making sure you've got the best features set on your devices, and learning from the home theater guru himself, Scott Wilkinson. I also want to mention that if you are a member of the club, so you won't hear this ad, so maybe I shouldn't say it during this. We'll say that at another point. Anyway, so
thank you so much to those of you who are considering subscribing at twit.tv/clubtwit. Please head there, check it out, consider joining the club and supporting us directly. If you'd like to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network. So please consider following there. And then also check out my shows. On Thursday, of course, I do Tech News Weekly, but also Hands on Mac for those of you who are members of the club. On Sundays, I host Ask the Tech Guys with Leo Laporte, who will be back for this Sunday's episode, where we take your questions and answer them live on air. And on Tuesdays, I host iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard. We've got loads of tips and tricks for iOS. All right, Jason Howell, what about you?
You can find me at Jason Howell on Twitter, twit.social/@Jason Howell on Mastodon. Coming soon to Bluesky, because I've installed it, but I haven't really set it up yet. All about Android every Tuesday, twit.tv/AAA, talking Android and stuff. And we're kind of heading into Google I/O season, so there's going to be some big hardware coming. So it's a good time to check that out. And then, filled in for Leo on This Week in Google yesterday. So if you haven't seen that yet, you should check it out. We had a lot of fun. We always do. But that's all there is to know about me. Big thanks to John. Big thanks to John. Big thanks to Burke. Everyone here at the studio helping us do this show each and every week. We couldn't do it without you guys. And we couldn't do it without you watching and listening each and every episode. Thank you so much for doing that. And we'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I am the host of Hands on Photography here on TWiT TV. I know you got yourself a fancy smartphone, you got yourself a fancy camera, but your pictures are still lacking. Can't quite figure out what the heck shutter speed means? Watch my show. I got you covered. Want to know more about just the ISO and exposure triangle in general? Yeah, I got you covered. Or if you got all of that down, you want to get into lighting, making things look better by changing the lights around you. I got you covered on that too. So check us out each and every Thursday here on the network. Go to twit.tv/hop and subscribe today.